So my son, Gabriel Woods, suffered from a seizure disorder. He had actually started having seizures when he was an infant. And at the age of 12, he had febrile seizures initially. And those are seizures that would come about as a result of a fever. And then at the age of 12, for the first time, he had a grand mal seizure. And the grand mal seizure was so deep that he had been outside playing. He came in the house and he went to get water, and he had a glass, and he poured the glass of water, and he started seizing. And he seized so much that he crushed the glass in his hand and then fell out on the kitchen floor. And that was my first experience with him having a grand mal seizure. That in itself, Raul, is a whole nother thing, because even the way that was handled was very unfortunate. I had a very difficult time getting medical support. I called an ambulance. They didn't want to take him, transport him to the hospital. Got to the hospital. They were like, well, we don't see anything wrong with him. I demanded they do an MRI, only to learn that Southern Maryland didn't do MRIs at that time. So they were like, well, we'll do a CAT scan, and they made me go through the whole thing of, you're paying for it because we don't deem it medically necessary, yada, yada, yada. So my husband and I said, do it. I'll pay for it. I need to find out what's going on with my son. They did it. My husband and I went to go to the gift shop to get some snacks or whatever. And as we're walking back from the gift shop, some doctor is running down the hallway to us. And that was the time they still took you in the little room. Mm-hmm. And the doctor said, I need to take you. He took us in a little room. And I'm immediately upset, because little room is never a good thing. Good. We go in a good little room, and he tells me, your son has a malignant brain tumor and there's nothing we can do about it. And I said, your delivery sucks. I was like, this is how you come and tell them. That's literally what he said. Your son has a malignant brain tumor and there's nothing we can do about it. And so, trying to make a long story short, because it's a long story, they winded up transporting him to Children's Hospital. Dr. Cohen was the brain surgeon at Children's at the time. He was actually on vacation. They called him in from vacation. Said, we need to do emergency surgery. He came in, he met with me and my husband, and he said, it's not good. He has a malignant brain tumor. Now, mind you, for years I'm telling them, we need to see what's wrong with my son. For years. It wasn't until this grand mal seizure that, from infancy, that they finally do something to check my child's brain, right? Mm-hmm. And Dr. Cohen was like, he has a malignant tumor. He's like, I hope you know how to pray. And literally when he said that, I was like, you know what? I do know how to pray. And I don't care what y'all going to say. My son is going to be all right. And they're like, well, we have to do emergency surgery. They prep my son for emergency surgery and then turn around and say, we had another child that came in and we have to take her first. And so the other child came in, Raul, they took her first and she died. I was like, oh my God. And so my son's surgery wound up being delayed till that Monday. And he went in on a Saturday. And they did his surgery. 7 hours later, they come back and they said, you a praying woman. Because it was not a malignant tumor. What it was he had a brain tumor and it imploded because it had been in his head for so long. Now, mind you, I have been telling these people, can you please rule out a medical condition? Because he was having behavioral challenges and all of these types of things. And I'm like, he has seizures. Nobody stopped to see why this child is having these seizures. So he had surgery. He was 12 years old, Raul. My son, after that surgery, did not have another seizure until he was 25. But when he had them, when they started at 25, they came back with a vengeance. They were horrendous. He wound up, he totaled 2 cars. It got to the point, up to the point of his death where he actually, literally the year of his death was the first time he was having seizures, and sometimes he would stop breathing. He would lose consciousness or he would stop breathing. And so that's why, as a mother, that was extremely important when I can't reach him, because I call him, he knows, respond when mom calls, or I'm going to be, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so that September the 7th, I started at 7:32 in the morning. I texted him, one of those good morning, how are you doing kind of things. And he didn't respond. And so then I called him like a half an hour later, maybe been an hour later, because we had prayer at 8. And I called him 8:30. No response. I'm like, okay, that's not usual, because my son will text me and say, I'll call you, Mom, I'll call you later, or whatever. Nothing. And so 9:30, by 10:30, I'm like, something is wrong. I know something is wrong. And so I reach out to his apartment complex first and say, I'm a little concerned. My son has a medical condition and I'm unable to reach him. That is extremely unusual. Twice they said, we'll call you back. Nothing. Never ever called back, ever. Then I got more nervous and I called his job. And I, just wanted to know if he'd made it into work. Well, our young people, right? My son had met a young lady that he was planning to marry, and unbeknownst to me, he made her his emergency contact now. Mm-hmm. So the job initially said, well, you're not on this list as an emergency contact. And so I wound up getting in touch with her, and I texted her. I'm like, have you talked to Gabe? I haven't seen him, and I haven't heard from him. I called his job and they said, you're the emergency contact. So she called the job and they said, someone called saying that was Gabriel's mother. She said it was his mother and she's concerned about him. I'm just wondering, did he make it to work? And they said no. He was a no-show, no-call. My son was never a no-show, no-call, ever. Okay, he was a supervisor on his job. He loved what he did. That just wasn't him. And so then the job actually did call me back to let me know. So now I'm calling the apartment complex. That's the second time, and they still will call you back. And nothing's happening, so I call the police and I say I need a welfare check because, I've made these calls. My son, this is not my son's behavior. He has a medical condition. This could be a life-threatening emergency. I need a welfare check. Well, unbeknownst to me, Raul, Virginia has a law that says if you want a welfare check in another state, that state police department has to contact us and give us permission. I didn't know this existed. This exists in multiple states. I didn't know that existed. I kind of understand why, because they get people that do the prank calls. They get people that constantly do this, just because they want to know what their ex-wife or, understand. And so that's cool. When I called 911, I didn't know at that time either that it is Homeland Security that answers the phone for us in Prince George's County. I didn't know that. I thought it was the police department. Well, the woman that I talked to was very nasty, very rude, telling me, ma'am, you haven't talked to your son in a few hours. If you think something's wrong, you need to file a missing persons report. I said, ma'am, I do this for a living. I don't need to file a missing persons report. I need a welfare check. I'm telling you that I believe that my son has a potential life-threatening emergency, and so I need somebody to go and check to see if he's in his, in his apartment.
You informed her about the seizures.
I just said life-threatening emergency. I didn't say, well, you know what, I don't know if I did say he has seizures. I know I said, he has a medical condition and that I believe this was a life-threatening emergency. And she's like, well, then you're going to have to call Prince George's County District 7. And so I called Prince George's County District 7 and I give them all the same information. They ask me for all of this information about my child.
Meanwhile, okay. Clock's ticking.
Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. I ask them for all this information about my child, and they say, okay, and they hang up. And I'm thinking, okay, they called Richmond, and it's done. About 2 hours later, the police come to my house. The police block my street. 2 cruisers, they block the street, 4 officers, they're coming up to my door. Needless to say, when I see this, I'm thinking the worst. So I go running out, and I'm kind of like, oh my God, like what's going on? And they were like, what's going on? And I said, that's what I'm trying to, I'm hoping you're coming here to tell me, what's happening. I asked for a welfare check, what's happening with my son? And the guy, the officer, I don't even remember what he said, but he just made me so angry. Mm-hmm. I said, I'm telling you, I need a welfare check. This is a life-threatening emergency. You going to he threatens to call emergency psychiatric response team for me. I'm not very Christian-like. I'm not very lady-like. All of those things went behind and I just went off. I'm like, dude, I'm concerned about my son. So I said some nice things to him and said, get off my property. And he did, and the other officers came up and they sent the female officer, it was one female, 3 males. And they sent the female officer up to me to talk to me. And I'm telling her, I said, ma'am, it's hours now. I reached out to my son at 7:32 in the morning. This is hours now. And I think he's having a life threat. He still never showed up to work, never called. Nobody's talked to him. Nobody's heard from him. Nobody can reach him. You know what I'm saying? I said the apartment complex, I didn't know this, wouldn't open the door because they felt like the police needed to come, but I felt like they should have called the police and saying this mother is saying something's wrong. They didn't do anything. They just kept saying, we'll call you back. We'll call you back. And they did nothing. Told you it was a real long story. I couldn't make short. But anywho, while the police were there, the girlfriend called because she lived in Richmond. And she said, can you all please go knock the door down? And they immediately went and knocked the door down, 6:17 p.m. And they found him in the bathroom. He had seized, he fell, he hit his head. And at some point he expired. The shower was still running. So he got up at some point that morning. His clothes were laid out on the bed and he seized and fell. We don't know what, because I never did get that clarity, what he hit his head on. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know because they didn't tell me that he hit his head until I saw him the day before his funeral. So you mean, my son had a seizure. He could have been laying there dying. Well, he died, because he hit his head and nobody will go in to check. So the apartment complex later told me the next day, well, we couldn't go in because, we don't know what we were getting into. That's fair. But then why didn't you ask the police to go with you and you open the door? You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
And check on my child. And it was interesting because the apartment complex was frustrated because the fire department knocked the door down. They wouldn't have had to knock the door down if you had opened the door, and you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And they could have gone in, or the police could have gone in, or whatever the protocol was.
So at what point did you decide to take your grief and move it into action?
So I had thought about running for office. I had planned to run for office, but when all of this happened, I didn't. Needless to say, my grief and my pain was, I can't even describe it. Another sidebar to this is the day that my son died, the day and the time that the police were at my house. After I learned my son died, I get a telephone call that my mother went into the hospital and she died 5 months later. And so, yeah. And my ex-husband, my daughter's father, died 3 months after that. So in 8 months, I lost 3 immediate family members, okay? Mm-hmm. And so I was just in a position I couldn't do anything. I was numb, I was depressed, I was going through everything you can imagine. And I was initially planning to run for office, and then I changed my mind. Senator Muse kept calling me saying, you need to run for office. And I was like, I can't. I can't. I'm not in the space, I'm not in a place. I can't think about that. I can't function. They kept calling me. Him and some other people kept calling. They're like, Jamila, we need you. We need you in Annapolis. We need you in Annapolis now. And I kept saying, no, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. I won't do it. I'm trying to maintain my own sanity, right? Mm-hmm. And so the last time, I'll tell you the funny thing is, when Senator Muse called me, he said, the filing deadline is February the 15th. And I said, you know what? I said, if God wants me to run, I said, he'll make a provision for me to go and file before February the 15th, right? So February 15th comes and goes, and I'm like, see, I know I'm cool. God don't want me to run. He calls me again. He's like, Jamila, when you going to file? I said, Muse, the deadline was February 15th. He said, oh, they extended it to March 15th. I said, they did? He was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, if God wants me to file, he'll make provisions for me to file, right? Said it again. Guess what, Rahul? March 15th came and went. I get a call from Senator Muse again. I'm like, Muse, I know the filing deadline is over now, Raul, do you know this is the first time in history they extended the filing deadline 3 times? They extended it to April the 15th. I said, God got jokes. God got straight up serious jokes. I was like, okay, Muse, I'm gonna go down there and I'm gonna file. And even when I went down there, I was having all kind of crazy problems and challenges. But I filed. I did not file until April the 13th. Okay, 2 days before the filing deadline. Okay, I didn't have my first fundraiser until May the 17th, which is less than 90 days from when early voting starts.
At that time, did you have at all in your mind that you were going to create legislation around your son's death?
I think I wanted to. I think in my mind, yes, that I was going to do that, right? I think in my mind I was going to do that. And I say I think in my mind because it was still such a strenuous time and I was just going through hell, and then I was going through stuff with my mother and her death. And so in my mind, I was like, we need legislation to prevent this. But can I tell you, the first year I couldn't do it. My first year, I couldn't do it. I couldn't pull myself together to do it. And it wasn't until this past legislation, I said, you know what, I'm gonna do it. I can't let my son's death go unnoticed. If there's anything I can do to prevent some other people, you understand what I'm saying, from this happening to somebody else, then I you know what I mean, I gotta do it. And so I met with the lieutenant governor. I said, you know, I want to meet with you, and I talked to her about it. And she's like, not only should you do legislation, you need to reach out to the media and get people involved in this because this is a serious thing. And so reached out to Channel 9, and Darcy Spencer called me, and first Tracy Wilkins called me, then she transferred it over to Darcy Spencer, and Darcy called me. She's like, Jamila, this is newsworthy. Like, this is something people need to know. And so she did the first story on it before I, you know what I mean, before it really got out. She did the first story while there was still the pending legislation. And why all of a sudden I get these calls in my office, that happened to me. That happened to me. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, this is really a thing? Like, this really happens to people? Like, this is not unusual? Like, you know, sometime in our naivete, we like to believe that this only happened to us, like nobody else. And to find out that other people are having this experience, right? That thing hurt me. And then I was like, oh no, I'm hell-bent on getting this legislation passed. And so it was so interesting because, Raul, you would not believe all the people tried to get that bill vetoed. The fire department was extremely upset. They literally tried very hard to get the bill vetoed because they felt like I was asking them to put them in a precarious situation where they would break down doors. And like, I don't know if you remember, and it was in this district that the man who killed a fire department, when they broke down his door because somebody requested a welfare check and he thought somebody was breaking in his house. And he shot and killed him. And their concern is, which I completely understand, their safety. But I said, this bill does not say you break down the door if you feel like there's a safety issue. Law enforcement, if you need law enforcement, then law enforcement has to be dispatched. You understand what I'm saying? Because first and foremost, we do have to protect your safety. Law enforcement can't do anything for us if they're not safe. I said, and you're, as a public servant, the fire department, it's the same thing. If you all have you know what I mean, then law enforcement needs to be dispatched and they need to come out immediately. You know, and my thing in my bill, and I use the word constantly, life-threatening emergency. I'm not talking about the man who says, I ain't seen my child in 6 months, I need a welfare check. You're not saying I believe something's wrong. You're not, you understand what I'm saying? You're not, or the one who, you know, he's mad at the ex-wife. And no, I'm talking about somebody who is a valid historian about the background of the person that they're calling. Because here it is, it doesn't have to just be a loved one. It could be a neighbor. It could be somebody you know what I mean, a close friend. If you have good information that this person could be having a life-threatening emergency, and that's what I'm saying about the valid historian. I was able to say my son has a seizure disorder. And he's had some hospitalizations. He had some the month before, okay, in August. He died in September. To me, when you say that, then that constitutes this is an urgent matter. Thousands of lives will be saved as a result of this law being, it's unfortunate that it had to be a law, But I believe thousands of lives will be saved because now people know there's accountability factor. And so that is so important.
And you say you have begun looking at this not just from one state within that state, but the crossing the
Yes.
state lines.
Yes.
You've already begun kind of moving
So
through.
I presented Gabriel's Law during the Women in Government conference that was held in Seattle, Washington a few weeks ago. And several women legislators said, we're taking this back to our state. We need to get this law put in place in our state. And I was like, yes, so it's not even just the 6.5 million people in the state of Maryland, but we can get this out. Somebody said, we need to try to make this federal legislation. I'm like, you know what? You're absolutely correct. I hadn't even thought about that. We have to, where you live should not impact how you live or whether you live, right? You are human beings. And here's the thing, if I told you that there was a head-on collision in front of my face and I saw it, you wouldn't ask me, like the questions they asked me about my son, you wouldn't ask me who's in the car, who's driving, what do they do for a living, who's their doctor, who's their, I don't know. My son was 36 years old, 34 years old, I'm sorry. I didn't know who his primary care physician is. He's a grown man. You understand what I'm saying? I didn't know a lot of things that we don't know when our children grow and they move and he's been away from home for years. And they're asking me questions that I simply can't answer. But what I can answer is his seizure history.
Right.
What I can answer is that I make sure that I reach out to my son daily, almost daily. I miss very few days, just, hey, checking on you, how you doing, how you feeling, what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the one day, and that's all it takes, right? Is the one day.
That's all.
Well, not to make it laws in their states,
Okay.
but it was proposed to me that we should consider trying to make it federal legislation. Because wouldn't it make sense? Make it matter.
Absolutely.
Make it make sense. Make it across the board. So that is something that I definitely want to look into.
What are some of the things that you take away now, given your son's medical history, where it wound up for him, your story in terms of the legislation, and even in terms of whether you were going to be part of the Annapolis legislators? All of this seems to have come together for some purpose.
Well, Raul, I believe in God, and I believe in divine intervention. And I believe if I had to lose my son, that there had to be an all things work together for good come out of it, right? And all things work together for good. What we fail to realize, and I really have to make this point, what we fail to realize sometimes is that when all things come together for good, we have to do the work too, right? We have to work through our pain. We got to push through our pain so that we can help to establish a purpose that will benefit someone else. And that is what gives us strength, right? That's what gives us hope. I mean, I would never want this to happen to anybody. And it happened to me, but if it happened to me, then now I have the capacity to try to make sure it doesn't happen to someone else. And that's what we need to do, and that's what we need to be as a people, right? Take the lesson and say, how do we take this and make it better for somebody else? Because taking and helping to make it better for somebody else helps me to heal.
Right. That's right. That's right. Thank you.